will help you reduce AWS costs 15 to 50% if you do what it tells you. But some people do. For example, watch their webcast, How Uber Reduced AWS Costs 15% in 30 days. That is 6 figures in 30 days. Rather than a thing you might do, this is something that they actually did. Take a look at it. It's designed for DevOps teams. NOps helps quickly discover the root causes of cost and correlate that with infrastructure changes. Try it free for 30 days. Go to nops.io/snark. That's nops.io/snark.
Way back at the start of these unprecedented times, we hosted 2 Q&A sessions. Our audience asked us a bunch of questions about AWS accounts and services, and not all of them fit into neat little categories. So here's a collection of the misfit toy questions that didn't really seem to fit anywhere else. How does the AWS partner ecosystem work regarding reselling of AWS services? Do they get a discount? Do they add services on top and merge the infrastructure cost with one single bill? Or are they doing something else entirely? From where I stand, resellers make their money on fairly low margins by capturing a percentage of their customer's AWS bill. In return for that percentage, they're basically responsible for the day-to-day care and feeding of the customer, ensuring that they're happy, fielding various support queries, and so on. That would keep me up at night, either with worry or support pages, depending. So I basically run screaming from the entire model personally, but that doesn't mean everyone does. When you're a reseller and you have a bunch of different clients that generate a lot of cloud spend collectively, there are further discounts that come into play. Remember, folks, no one pays retail at scale with any cloud provider. As resellers start making the pile of customers bigger and bigger, the discounts of that collective spend is commensurate, and they can make some solid money that way. Plus, let's remember, resellers generally aren't sitting there as these uninvolved third parties. They also provide a bunch of value-added services that they can bill for, which vary, of course, by the reseller. But there's a lot of risk that comes along with being a reseller. If a customer goes away, you're exposing yourself to significant business risk. AWS will still expect you to pay, even if your customers aren't paying you. In my opinion, the trade-off for what seemed like fairly paltry returns doesn't quite seem worth the downside risk. But again, I'm not a reseller and I don't work with them professionally. If I've gotten this wrong, please reach out and let me know. My perspective may very well not be their perspective, and that's fine. The next question was, we currently see a shortage of spot instances. What's your take on this, and have you seen similar things recently? So we've seen an increase in spot determinations across most availability zones and most instance types that you'd actually want to use. But it's not dramatic, and it's not tightly coupled to sharp swings in pricing. What's tricky is that since the reworking of the spot market model a few years ago, is that we don't see dynamic price spikes anymore the way we used to. What we do see lack of inventory and increased terminations during shortfall periods. This is incidentally tied to one of the problems that I've been vaguely concerned about, where everyone's model has assumed that spot pricing would remain a fixed low fee that was easily predictable. What if pricing changed? Would your business still be tenable at typical reserved instance prices? Because I'm not willing to bet the company, or any company, on spot pricing remaining as low as it is forever. On the topic of spot, the next question was, how long do they last? Well, it depends. Eric Hammond, a community hero, talked about running his own development spot instance with a 14-month uptime before he had to restart it for some things without any sort of interruption. Other times, instances can last less than a day before being terminated. So if this is something that's important to you, run some experiments and find out. Also assume that everything you see is going to be edge cases in general, and your app has to respond gracefully to that. I'll point out as well that I wound up seeing an instance that I'd been running go 3 months without interruptions, and then over a 2-day span, it saw 60 interruptions. There was clearly a capacity issue, but the pricing held still. Again, this is anecdata, use it for what it's worth, but have a backup plan. If you're looking to wind up standing up infrastructure but don't want to spend 6 months going to cloud school first, consider Linode. They've been doing this far longer than I have. They're straightforward to get started with. Their support is world-class. You'll get an actual human empowered to handle your problem rather than passing you off to someone else like some ridiculous game of ticket tennis. And They are cost competitive with any other provider out there, with better performance in almost every case. Visit linode.com/morningbrief to learn more. That's linode.com/morningbrief. One of the recommendations people have seen me make is to move instances into public subnets to remove or reduce managed NAT gateway charges. Any recommendations on how to convince clients that this doesn't reduce security? Security folks have been trying and failing to convince the internet for years that NAT is not a security measure. Okay, sure, if you say so. Don't email me. NAT by itself is not an expensive problem. It's the managed NAT gateway that's the expensive piece. I would love to see a community-driven, very robust CloudFormation snippet that acts as a click button, receive output that replaces the managed NAT gateway. Because let's face it, that thing is egregiously priced. It has an endpoint charge, so it starts at $70 or change per month per NAT gateway, as well as the per gigabyte data processing fee of 4.5 cents, which is on top of the per gigabyte data transfer fees that you'll see depending on where that data is going. It's just awful. How do you tell a compelling story for people who own data in S3 to set up life cycles that ultimately end with expiration? Honestly, I've given up on a lot of that. If you look at this at a global level, there's not much need to delete things anymore the way there once was with the advent of Glacier Deep Archive. Given that it costs you $1,000 per month per petabyte, it's easier and saves everyone time to just convince people to send data to Deep Archive. Can you handle a 12-hour latency at retrieving this at one point? Great. That's an easier sell than convincing people to delete their data. Remember, data science is an entire industry built on convincing people to never delete anything because you can't justify the enormous cost of a data scientist when they only have a few terabytes to work on. No. They need big data, a veritable data swamp, as you were. Let me guess. Your pressing question might not be included in this collection that I've just gone through. Well, you're in luck. Drop me a line on Twitter or anywhere else you can find me, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you.
This has been a Humble Pod production. Stay humble.